Well, thank you all for closing the day with me. I just want to provide a few thoughts and give you an opportunity to share some of your thoughts as well on the day. This is the first symposium of its kind that we've had, so we're very interested in your reaction. Just so you know, we had 25 panelists today that shared their conversation with us, and 405 attendees, folks that signed up to listen and that provided comments and questions along the way. And I want to thank every one of you, all the panelists, all the attendees for your time, your energy today, and for making this a success. Some of you, like me, attended every single one of the panels, and if so, you're awesome. Some of you attended one or two, and maybe you're curious about how the other ones went. And so let me just share with you some of my thoughts and what I heard, starting at the beginning of the day with SAHA residents live in quality, affordable housing. We heard from representatives from HUD, from the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, from SAHA, and from City of San Antonio. And we learned that housing and housing quality exists not in a vacuum, but in the context of specific neighborhoods. And that poses some interesting policy challenges, right? We need to balance competing goals of resident choice, wanting to expand resident choice against the reality of existing neighborhood challenges, understanding resident needs, as well as neighborhood amenities. And also balancing individual household needs at any given time against the population needs in aggregate. The group also talked about the affordable housing ecosystem and how it includes many different organizations. It's not just SAHA. It includes many different developers, builders, property managers, funders, each with their own focus, their own limitations, but they all need to engage with the community and be responsive to the community. One example that was called out as a great success in terms of this kind of partnership and integrating housing with neighborhood revitalization was the Choice Neighborhood Initiative on the East Side. This was a great example of the kind of partnerships that are needed to coordinate provision of new housing, as well as improving neighborhood conditions. This was a partnership between SAHA, the city, United Way, Trinity University, SAISD, and local neighborhood organizations as well. And we also heard that when we recognize housing as a human right, we also recognize and address the diversity of the range of human needs. In many cases, housing will need to be supplemented with supportive services that are tailored to those needs. Folks, veterans with PTSD, folks that need access to regular health care, or specialized education or training, or childcare. So in many cases, those services can be provided in the same community complex as the unit, but they don't always need to be confined to the perimeter of the housing unit or the complex. And instead, maybe we need to think about how we integrate those services into the design and characteristics of the neighborhood overall. So questions of walkability, of lighting, of safety, schools and transit access, all at the neighborhood scale that impact everybody, also impact SAHA residents. The next session we heard from was about CDI partnerships, Community Development Initiative partnerships. And here we had representatives of LISC, Texas A&M, San Antonio, the City of San Antonio, and United Way. And they discussed the challenges and opportunities of collaborating, working together to meet residents' needs. The goal of SAHA's CDI department is to help SAHA residents access education, employment, health, any other services that they may need in order to meet their goals. And so the discussion was started out with, needing to be clear that these households face significant challenges that are not of their own making, and that there are structural barriers that limit individual choices. and that it's not fair to ask individuals to overcome those systemic challenges by themselves. And that's where collaboration between all these agencies comes in. Um, and it's not easy. Collaboratives between organizations are a lot of work. It feels like a lot of extra work sometimes, and collaboration fatigue is a real thing. But the alternative isn't so great. The alternative is a potentially unproductive status quo, where in the worst case scenario, we're duplicating services and we're locked in competition against each other instead of working together. We rely on federal funding for many of our local programs. Many of us do, many organizations do. And so it's critical as we pursue local goals to also push for policy changes at the federal level. The group discussed and that historically trends at the national housing policy have prioritized homeowners over renters, have prioritized seeing housing as a commodity and not as a right, and that it's been okay for many, many years to let public housing deteriorate at the national level. That's been the thinking. And so if we want to think otherwise, we need to also work on changes at the federal level in order to make progress at the local level. And finally, there was a suggestion that one way to combat collaboration fatigue is to share metrics between city and SAHA and the county and others that may be working on similar projects. And that way we could share and show progress and show how we're making efforts to meet our goals together. We took the third panel was SAHA Residents Feel Safe. This one had representatives from the Center for Healthcare Services, the City of San Antonio, SAHA, and the Fair Housing Council. And here the focus of the conversation was about the many different aspects of safety. It's not just one thing, it's many things. And whether you look at it at the neighborhood scale or within the unit, or including personal interactions with management, interactions with other residents. One of the panelists said that human rights starts at home, and that from the public health perspective, safety starts by looking at interpersonal relationships, but also looking at the broader community and the kind of opportunities and access to employment and access to other housing that are provided in order for individuals to access safer spaces. Safety can mean freedom from hazardous physical features, but it can also mean freedom from chronic stress and anxiety. For example, from living in a high crime area, that even if you're not a direct victim of crime, you live with that chronic worry that it could happen at any moment. The group talked about how safety varies depending on the resident, and that some with mental health challenges may not be able to distinguish between safe and unsafe conditions. Cecil King from Center for Healthcare Services talked about how one of the things that their care managers do is really help their clients just make that distinction between what is safe and what is an unsafe condition. Talking solutions, one of the strategies, many of the strategies revolved around communication. And whether that communication is with authorities like the property management or the SAPD, or communication with each other, between residents and the surrounding community, at community events in formal or informal ways, and in response to incidents of violence, like the stand-up team and folks that go in to try to transcend the moment of violence into one of healing and community building. And that safety, sometimes you can, there are indirect ways to address the feelings of safety, and something like our small area fair market rent policy, which makes vouchers more affordable or more powerful across the city, makes it easier for residents to move out of an unsafe condition and find a safer neighborhood and a safer unit somewhere else. The, the fourth panel was about utilities and discussed the affordability of utilities. We heard from SAWS, CPS Energy, and the City of San Antonio. We learned that there are no national definitions for what affordable utilities are, like there is for housing, where we always say that a housing should cost no more than 30% of your household income. But there are national conversations that are looking at that right now, and how we should measure affordability for utilities. And we're happy to have partners at the table that are engaged in those conversations. There was discussion about how the free market is not providing equal access to everybody in the city of San Antonio. And so many of our partners, many of our strategies have to go sort of outside the market in order to ensure universal access. SAWS and CPS have various specific programs to provide assistance to customers, as well as programs that promote energy conservation as a strategy. Programs to address the digital divide, which is increasingly seen as a critical utility in itself, also exists with the city, partnering with Goodwill, with SAHA, with Oates, and with other partners. And the group also had a lively discussion about how to avoid scams and the typical scams that are out there right now. The supply team included representatives from the Housing Trust, from Via Metro, Franklin Development, NRP, SAHA, and the San Antonio Regional Alliance for the Homeless. And they discussed how we think about what is a sufficient supply of affordable housing. And they started out by trying to define affordability, and that's a huge topic unto itself. It's complex, especially when we consider housing affordability and transportation affordability together. One framework that was proposed to think about affordability had a five-point structure, including cost burden, like whether a resident can actually afford a specific unit, income targeting, meaning what area median income band applies, whether it's 30% or 60% or 80% of AMI. What part of town should be targeted for, and that's called geographic targeting. What subset of San Antonio population needs affordability the most, and that's population targeting. And finally, how long affordability should run with a property, so the time period of the affordability. The group acknowledged that if, when you acknowledge housing as a human right, you also start talking about tenant rights and how tenants' rights need to be supported more in this context. And there was a consensus that this would require a concerted education campaign in order to promote these ideas throughout the city. From the financial perspective, there was a discussion about how strong financing is needed to provide the deep affordability, but you also need equity. And traditionally that equity for affordable housing is tax credits. But we need to find additional sources, and perhaps bond financing is one of those bond funds that can then be income targeted and equitably distributed. The final group looked at the provision of food to SAHA residents, and we had the San Antonio Food Bank, City of San Antonio, and Meals on Wheels. We learned that there's a significant spike in demand due to COVID, but that the need and challenges related to food insecurity predate the pandemic. The root causes of food insecurity include income, household income, residential location, skills, and characteristics of the food market. And addressing those root causes of inequity in the economy really would include efforts like championing a living wage, providing for paid time off, and other initiatives that have a direct impact on household income. At the same time, and meanwhile, we should also be taking advantage of opportunities to leverage donations and charitable programs with programs like SNAP and WIC, and as well as SAHA efforts and city programs. There was a consensus that there's a no wrong door approach, and the meaning that individuals are encouraged to reach out to anybody they can who will then help them to find the appropriate resource. Sometimes there are challenges based on location constraints or other funding restrictions, but all the panelists expressed a commitment to work with anyone who needs assistance to help them secure what they need. So I think just a final thought from this group, even as we acknowledge that we need to teach people how to fish, we need to give them the fish while they're learning. So hunger must be addressed first, even as we also at the same time address the root causes of hunger. So that was my summary of the panels. Were there some overarching themes? I'm curious as to whether you heard overarching themes in the panels you participated in. I'll go ahead and share mine, but if you want to go ahead and type into the chat or the Q&A and share yours as well, or if you want to talk, we can open up the discussion as well. But here are the themes I heard. I heard focus, balance, and coordination. Sounds like a trapeze artist of some kind, but I heard that we needed to focus on resident needs, on communication with residents, feedback from residents, listening to residents. That we need to focus on the impact that we're having on resident lives, whether it's directly or indirectly. And that one of those critical needs is the need for agency, for having real options. And that we need to maintain our focus on resident needs, even as those needs change within a single household over a lifetime. I heard discussion of balance, that we're working in a complex arena. We need to balance multiple goals, multiple strategies, multiple desired outcomes, neighborhood characteristics, unit characteristics, place-based strategies, as well as mobility-based strategies. And that we really need to focus on coordination between federal, state, and local levels, collaborative efforts among local organizations, and even stronger coordination between programs within single agencies. So let me pause there for a second. I see one Q&A. Oh, thank you, Suleika. Suleika says great summary. Thank you. Any other comments, chats? Anyone want to speak? We can unmute you. I know it's getting late, but if you're burning to say something, now's your chance. You can raise your hand if you want, and I'll unmute. Okay, well, we'll give you a few more minutes to see if you want to raise your hand, say something. In the meantime, let me just echo what our Chair Guzman and our interim president CEO Hinojosa said at the beginning of today's symposium with their call to partnership. I think that's the other thing I heard today is how important that is. And I just want to echo that same call. A lot of what I heard today was was new ideas that were happening while we were talking. So we definitely want to encourage that and follow up on that. And your questions and comments at each panel generated new avenues of exploration, and we look forward to exploring those with you. Again, if you would like to say something, just raise your hand. You may have some thoughts later in the day or later in the week. If so, the best way to reach out to us is at SAHA 2025 at saha.org. Again, that email address is SAHA 2025 at saha.org. With any follow-up ideas, any questions, any comments, if you want to stay informed regarding the progress of this work as we continue to roll it out, our next steps are to take the conversation that happened today bring it back to the outcome teams that are working on how we're actually going to implement this on the ground, make some adjustments based on what you said, and roll out some implementation over the next 6 months, over the next 12 months, and come back to you. One thing I really would like to know is whether you thought this was a good format. So if not now, sometime in the next week or so, just shoot an email to saha2025@saha.org and let me know whether the symposium format was good, whether it gave you what you needed to know, and whether we should do it again. All right. All right, I have one vote for yes from Virginia Carmona. Thank you, Virginia. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Any other thoughts, questions? All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you for sticking with me till 5:10 p.m. And let's have a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and let's keep in touch.